title for today is Give Us Barabbas, and this is taken from the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the trial portion of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. We're going to be using the text from Matthew 27, but you would also find this in Mark chapter 15 and Luke chapter 23. Those are called the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where the stories are incredibly similar, but there will be some differential between the telling of the stories. Not a contradiction, but just different details that have been either included or omitted. Matthew chapter 27, we're going to read the text, and then we're going to kind of go back over the text and kind of flesh it out a little bit about what it's talking about. Again, this is at the trial of Jesus just after the arrest, but before the crucifixion. Matthew chapter 27, starting in verse 11, and it reads, "And Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, Art thou the king of the Jews?" Now this is Pilate, the Roman governor. He says, "Art thou the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said unto him, "Thou sayest." Verse 12, "And when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then said Pilate unto him, Hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? And he answered him to never a word, insomuch that the governor marveled greatly." Verse 15, "Now at the feast the governor was in the custom of releasing to the people a prisoner, whomever they would. And they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, Whom will ye that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ? For he knew that it was for envy they had delivered him." Verse 19, "When he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sentenced him, saying, Have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitudes that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said unto them, Whether of the twain will that I release unto you? And they said, Barabbas. Verse 22, "Pilate saith unto them, What shall I do then with Jesus, who is called Christ? They all say unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, Why? What evil hath he done? But they cried the more, saying, Let him be crucified. Then Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but rather that the tumult was made. He took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and then he scourged Jesus and delivered him to be crucified." Now this story actually reads pretty quickly, but there's a lot to understand and kind of unpack here, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go back and flesh out this story. The first takeaway from this story is we need to understand who Barabbas is. Whenever they say a notable prisoner, Barabbas gets scant little, if any, mention in the historical books. But what happens is that Barabbas is a terrorist. And we know that he has attempted at least one revolution to throw off Rome, perhaps others, but he has done at least one attempt to throw off the yoke of Rome, and that in this attempt to throw off the yoke of Rome, he has committed murder, that he has killed innocent people, we might say non-combatants or civilians or bystanders, but he has killed off people, and some have said that they believe the people that he killed were Roman sympathizers. The examples of this would be like Levi, who was called Matthew, who was a tax collector. So you have people that are living in Judea who are themselves Jews, but they're doing the things that are enabling Rome or helping Rome to be in the area and occupy the area. And they're viewed as a sort of traitor or sort of Roman sympathizer. These may have been the people that Barabbas targeted in order to get rid of Rome. Now then, in the ancient world, there were a lot of perks to being in the Roman Empire. It came with a lot of goodies. Some of those goodies, there's an old Monty Python movie that I do not recommend, but I'm going to talk about it now. The Monty Python movie is called The Life of Brian, and it's this figure that exists at the time of Jesus, and they have these interactions that are like of the time of Jesus. And one of the rebel bands that they have in this movie, The Life of Brian, is called the People's Front of Judea. And so the People's Front of Judea are gathered in their back room behind the tavern, and the ringleader says, "What have the Romans ever done for us?" And then one of the guys says, "Well, there's fresh water." And he says, "What?" He said, "Well, they came in and they built aqueducts, and so there's fresh water. It pipes the sewage out of the city. It's a lot cleaner now." So the guy says, "Okay, well, other than fresh water, what have the Romans ever done for us?" And another guy pipes up and says, "Well, they fixed the road." He said, "Whenever the Romans showed up, they put in cobblestones and they patched the road." The guy says, "Well, okay, well, other than fresh water and fixing the road, what have the Romans ever done for us?" And another one says, "Well, there's education." Said, "We can all speak Greek now, so we're all better educated. We can read and write better than we can before, communicate with the rest of the Mediterranean world." Yes. Well, okay, other than fresh water, fixing the road, and education, what have the Romans ever done for us? And another guy says, "Well, they dealt with crime." He said they had the Pax Romana, they got the criminals off the streets. It's a lot safer in the city today. The guy goes, okay, well, other than fresh water, fixing the road, education, and crime, what have the Romans ever done for us? And another guy says, "Well, there's the economy. They engaged us in trade because of the road and the ships that come, and so we can trade with the rest of the Roman world, so they kind of help with the economy and unemployment." So guys, well, okay, other than fresh water, fixing the road, education, crime, unemployment, and the economy, what have the Romans ever done for us? So they all stand there for a minute. They stand for a minute. They say, "Nothing!" He goes, "That's right, the Romans have done nothing for us." So that's the punchline in that movie. But the point being is that, yeah, there were a lot of perks that came with being in the Roman Empire. There was national security. I think that may have been on the list. There was national security. You didn't have to deal with like invasion. You didn't have to worry so much about other empires or other people attacking you. So there was a lot of being able to live in peace and some degree of security inside the Roman Empire. So there were a lot of perks, but there were also a lot of detractors. There were a lot of bad things about being in the Roman Empire. At the top of that list was outlandish taxes. And when you understand the Holy Lands in particular, where Jerusalem sits, the reason why so many armies have died in that section of land is because historically that has been the prime real estate on the planet. If there's trade in Africa, Asia, or Europe, going by caravan, it travels through that region one way or the other, and empires, rather than paying taxes, would pay tribute to whoever held that property. So if the Greeks held that section of land and the Ethiopians wanted to send, or Egyptians wanted to send salt and goods from Africa into Asia, rather than fight the Greeks for the property, they would just pay the Greeks. So they would pay the Greeks that had control of that region. They would send a tribute every year for the right to send caravans through that section of land. So what happens is that the tax revenue that's completely unrelated to the people that live there is astronomical. The money that has been there to be made is on a national level in the old world. So just holding that property will increase the wealth of your national coffers incredibly. And that, my friend, is why legion after legion after army has gone there, and people have died in this 6 to 9 mile stretch of property. More people have probably died there that if the bodies were ever stacked up, it'd be higher than the mountains. Over the course of the centuries that people have warred in order to own that section of land. Now then, what adds insult to injury is that Rome is already getting outlandish amounts of money because they control that land. Then to go ahead and just wring and milk every dollar, every bit of silver and copper out of the population is super offensive, because Rome is already getting rich just owning the place. Then to come back and slap more taxes on top of more taxes and top of more taxes, to the point that it's just backbreaking for the people. The people are living on next to nothing, and everything is going to Rome. And there is an irony, in my opinion, of the Christian Christmas story actually begins with taxation. That the reason why the whole story of Bethlehem and the manger and the wise men and the magi and all of it starts really with Rome sending out a census to number the people in order to tax them. So the actual beginning of the story of Bethlehem has to do with unjust taxes. Yeah, nothing much has changed, has it? Oh my gosh. So taxes, definitely number one spot. Other things that are not good about the Roman occupation is the culture. You don't have to go far to find naked statues of Roman gods and Roman deities. Roman art, Roman culture is kind of antithetical to the Jewish culture of the day. And the Romans were very Hellenistic, which is to say, we're going to make the world Rome. Whenever they would conquer a place, the goal was that these people are going to become citizens. So they were very invasive in terms of Roman culture going into the local community. And that really grinded with a lot of the Jews. They don't want Roman culture. We don't want nude statues everywhere. We don't want your pagan gods. We don't want your all of the Roman culture that comes with. We don't want it. We want it out of our country. And then last but certainly not least was the institution of conscription. And what conscription is whenever Rome would conquer a place, then out of that province, that region, they would want to garner an army. Young men, military-age men, a certain number of those men are going to be conscripted in order to serve in the Roman army. They're going to be taken to a foreign land. They're going to stay there for 6 years, and they're going to train, and they're going to come out of there as legionnaires. Also, you had the institution of slavery for people that couldn't pay their taxes, people that got involved in crime, and a wide range of other things. Rome would tend to take a lot of slaves out of a population, a local population. They would tend to conscript young boys that would be taken to foreign lands, and who knows what would happen to them in those foreign lands. Who knows what kind of fate they would endure, if they would die on a battlefield in some other place, conquering some other region of some other people that didn't want Roman culture for them. So there were a lot of reasons why people didn't want the Romans around. So Barabbas actually has a ready-made audience to hear this story of let's throw off the Romans, let's get rid of the Romans. Now then, so if everybody was kind of upset with the Romans, and if the being a Roman was so negative, why is it that Rome got so big to start with? Well, first of all, Rome did have a lot to offer the people. However, whenever Rome would go in and conquer a region, they would try to avoid collateral damage. And what that is that they're going to try to keep the casualties minimal, and they're going to try to keep the destruction of property minimal. And even Sun Tzu in The Art of War alludes to this. The idea of when you take a city, try to take the city intact. Try to conquer a place without destroying everything. And there's a reason for that. You want to go in and not burn the orchard and not burn the vineyard, so that the following year it will produce fruits and it will produce grapes which can be sold on the market, and that's going to produce tax revenue. When you go into a place, you don't want to kill the blacksmith, because you want that blacksmith to continue to make horseshoes and wagon rims so that he can sell that at the marketplace for money and pay his taxes. You go into a place, you don't want to burn the place to the ground because you want those businesses and those institutions and those houses and those people and those products and goods and services to continue. You want the weaver to continue to make cloth. You want the shoemaker to continue to make sandals. You want the leather worker to continue to make saddles and harnesses. You want the camel breeder guy at the stable to continue to grow and sell camels. Because why? Because all of this stuff is what's going to pay the taxes that's going to fund the army that conquered the place to begin with. And various empires across human history have literally conquered their way into bankruptcy. War is tremendously expensive, and it's hazardous whenever you go out and conquer lands. If those lands don't pay anything, then you are looking at a negative return. It's not a good thing. So whenever Rome would conquer a region, they would do everything in their power to make the burning, the looting, the pillaging, and the killing as little as possible. However, if that province, region, or state rebels against Rome, throws off Rome, it's going to be a very different story next time. Next time, whenever Rome has to come back and pay for again the army that's coming back into the region, they're going to show up with a point to prove. They're going to show up with a legion and a whole lot of mercenaries, and whenever they come through, they will purposefully sack, burn, loot, pillage, and just make mayhem. The goal is not just to conquer, but to punish, to just obliterate. They are going to take convoys, caravans of slaves. They are going to just hurt people. And that's the whole point. Whenever Jesus walks through the temple and they say to him, Jesus, consider thou this great building and all these fine stones, and don't we have this nice place? Jesus says to them, there will be a day when not one stone will be on the other. And that literally came true. In 70 AD. In 70 AD, I'm old, but I'm not that old. In 70 AD, the revolution does take place. It wasn't Barabbas that headed up the revolution, but they do manage to throw off for a very short time the Romans. The Romans show back up in 70 AD, exactly the way I'm describing it. Legions, mercenaries, and they torched the place. Now, the temple had gold in it, lots and lots of gold. They had gold ornaments, they had gold fixtures, they also had a lot of wooden trim molding, like here in our sanctuary today. You can see all the wooden buttresses and the wooden trim molding and stuff. They also had tapestries, which are these huge, heavy woven curtains that are on the sides of the building. So whenever the temple caught fire, it melted the gold. Now, gold melts at a very low temperature. It's similar to lead. You can literally melt it on your kitchen stove in a saucepan. So what happens is whenever all of this wood and tapestries and cloth and furnishings and all the fine mahogany and best cedar and everything catches fire and burns, these golden ornaments and golden plates and golden fixtures, they all melt. And Josephus in his writing talks about it seemed like there were gleaming rivers of gold coming down, these teardrop rivers of gold coming down the stones. And as they were coming down the stones, remember, the stones are very hot because the place is burning. So the gold would kind of saturate, would kind of seep in between the fissures in these rocks. And so then the city is burned. Okay, so it's the days following the conquest. The city's burned and trashed out. And this siege went on for a long time. They built this, the sieging of Jerusalem took place over months and months and months and months. Lots and lots of time. So after the city is burned and conquered and it's all gone, what Rome does first is standard operating procedure. The first thing they do is they pay all the mercenaries, all of the soldiers for hire that they have brought with them. They pay them all to current and get them off the payroll because they don't want to keep paying these guys because the fighting is done. Okay, so here you are in Jerusalem, and there's literally thousands of these big burly mercenaries from all over the Roman world who are now unemployed. They've got their pay, but they have nothing to do. There is no job to go to in the morning. However, there's this ruined temple that has got tons of gold in it. And if we can just get a few flakes of that gold, because it's the best gold in the Roman world, it's awesome top shelf gold. And if we can get just a few kernels of it, it'll probably double what we were paid to come here and sack the place. So what do? These big burly mercenaries walk down into the marketplace and along the alleys and streets, and they grab Joe Schmo, the schlub, and they run him over to the temple and tell him to start cracking rocks. Take and push these rocks over and get every last kernel of gold. It is like a synthetic gold mine, and that's exactly what they do. There's sledgehammers and pickaxes, and you've got all of these little plebes, these peasants out there sifting through the dust with these overlord, taskmaster mercenaries beating them senselessly in efforts to get every last little drop of gold. And so the words of Jesus come literally true. No two stones were even touching each other. That's what happened to Herod's temple. And that is a word of caution for everybody that takes pride in the massive buildings that we build. They are not that important to God. So anybody with a brain hears the words of Barabbas and says that is not what we want. We don't want to throw off Rome. We don't want to bring the legion back here. We don't want the place burned to the ground. We don't want to spend our lives in slavery. We don't want Barabbas to get what he's asking for. Barabbas' message of let's throw off the Romans is something that would appeal to emotion-driven people, people that were already in a state of oppression, people that were probably poorly educated. Barabbas' message is going to resonate with kind of the lower class of society. Anybody that was a thinking person, anybody that had any kind of a stable life would have heard Barabbas' message and said, somebody needs to throw him in prison. He doesn't need to be in the population. He is a bad, bad, bad person. Into this mix, we come takeaway number 2, who was Pilate. Pilate was both a soldier, a Roman soldier, and he's also a politician. And he understands, he has a knowledge that if he's going to rule in Jerusalem, that in some capacity, he has to be a hearts and minds guy. He's got to have the support of the people. He's got to have people that look at Rome and say, Rome is a good thing. Rome is something we need to keep. He needs the populace to be, at least in some measure, on board with him. Now, the celebration of Passover is the blood of the Lamb, which is where the children of Israel come out of Egypt. And this is the last of the 10 plagues of Egypt. So before this, and I'm not going to name them all, but you had the frogs and the river turning to blood, the frogs, the flies, the lice, the darkness, and as you go through the locusts, as you go through these plagues of Egypt, as they get to the end, Egypt is just at the breaking point, and the last plague that hits Egypt is the death of the firstborn. And so the people take the Passover lamb. This is commanded by Moses. They take the Passover lamb and they kill the lamb and they put the blood above the doorpost. They take and put on the doorpost of their homes, they put the blood of the lamb, so that whenever the angel of death comes into the land of Egypt, it sees these homes, and on the doorpost of these homes is the blood of the lamb, and the angel of death passes over that house. And that's where you get the name Passover. So every house that he comes to, and there's lamb's blood on the door, the angel of death doesn't go inside. He passes over that house. And the people inside that house live. Now that's a metaphor for Jesus, our Lord. Whenever he dies, we take his blood, we take his death, and we apply that to our lives, so that whenever the angel of death comes, it doesn't attack us, it doesn't enter us. The angel of death passes over us. And so we experience Passover in Jesus, because it's his death, the price that was paid for our sins, and that causes the angel of death to have no rightful claim to our lives or homes. And so what happens is there's a Passover. And so, but what happens to the houses that don't have the blood of the Lamb? The angel of death goes inside, and the firstborn is seen as sort of the icon of the family, a representative of what the family is as a whole, and the firstborn dies. So then, whenever the morning comes, there's just all this wailing in Egypt, and they literally take the gold out of their homes. They take their silver, and they throw it in the wagons and on the backs of the camels and the donkeys, and they essentially throw the the Israelites out. They go, just leave. We've had it. The water, the blood, the frogs, the lice, the locusts, and now this. Our kids are dead. Get out of our country. Go. And they released not just the Israelites, but they released practically every slave in the place. And the Bible tells us they come out of Egypt a mixed multitude. So it's not just Hebrews, it's not just Israelites that come up out of Egypt. It's every slave in the place. It's like, get out. And this is the celebration of Passover, is the liberation. You had people that were in captivity, and now they're free. And so Pilate, he kind of knows this is the culture, and he cabbages onto this. He gets a hold of this. He says, we'll do that. We'll go into the prisons, we'll find somebody that's in captivity, and we'll let them go. Then that way, we're kind of celebrating Passover too. This person was in prison, and now then they're going to go free. So this is our way of kind of making a Roman-esque version of Passover. And so this is going to resonate with a lot of the people. But you can imagine if Pilate is going to set somebody free, and he's a politician and a soldier, he's going to try to get the maximum return for that. So he's going to look for somebody that was falsely accused. He's going to look for somebody where maybe the evidence was a little sketchy. He's going to look for somebody that, hey, it was kind of a minor crime. That wasn't really very serious. That person maybe shouldn't have been in prison anyway. Maybe there was extenuating circumstances that person was kind of in jail but shouldn't have been. So Pilate's going to fish for a prisoner to release that's going to make him look like the good guy in the eyes of the people. Okay? Which is the whole purpose for doing it to start with. So the last thing that Pilate's going to do is to release some serial killer that everybody hates. He's not going to turn out Charles Manson. Okay? He's not going to turn out a dangerous person. So in this instance, he has Jesus standing accused, and people are wanting to kill him, and he hatches this plot. Another thing I want to say is that I have no evidence to support the idea that in all of the years that Pilate did this, that it was ever an election. Would you like candidate A or would you like candidate B? I don't have any evidence that he's ever done this before. A couple things. Any leader will tell you, especially in church settings, have as few congregational votes as possible. And here's why. Whichever side gets outvoted is going to have a burr to grind. Whichever side, it doesn't matter. Whatever the subject matter is. I have seen churches split over the color of the cover of the hymnal. Okay? And so have very, very few, if any, elections, because you're going to have a loser, and that loser is going to have an axe to grind. Secondly, this is the Roman Empire. They saw what happened to the Greeks. Pure democracy is really nothing other than legitimized mob rule, if you think about it. Pure democracy, where everybody has a vote, is really nothing more than legitimized mob rule. And it was very, very frowned upon in the ancient world. So I don't know that Pilate has ever gone before the people and said, would you like this prisoner or would you like that prisoner? Okay, but he sure does it this time, because this is part of his plan on how to dodge the Jesus issue. So he goes into the prison and he finds the very worst prisoner, the very most contemptible criminal, and he drags him up. And he says, so here's Barabbas. He's a terrorist. He's an insurrectionist. He's a murderer. He is scum. And my only critique of the movie, The Passion of the Christ, really, in my opinion, is that they portray Barabbas as just being a deranged murderer. And they have him up there, he's all got boogered up teeth. Okay? That's really not the image of Barabbas. Barabbas is a calculated, cold, horrible supervillain of a person. And so Pilate has him in the dungeon. And he's like, I got it. I know how I'm going to get Jesus off the hook. So he goes into the dungeon, he grabs Barabbas, drags him out here. Who would support that guy? And then he puts Jesus up there. He says, oh, okay, well, it's Passover. Woohoo! Who would you like for me to turn loose? This Jesus character over here that turns, bread to 5,000 people and fishes, and who heals the sick and the blind and the lame, and goes out into the wilderness and teaches great stories about, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are those that, there's this awesome rabbi over here, or we have the deranged, murderous, super criminal. So who of these two guys would you like for me to turn loose? Pilate has created what he honestly believes will be a rigged election. That there is no way that this thing can go sideways. He's wrong on two counts. First of all, he's horribly underestimated just how much the political and religious leaders hate Jesus. And secondly, he hasn't taken into account that this is God's will. The road to the cross is God's will. So after the election goes sideways, Pilate tries to resort to Out From Under the Thumb, Volume 2. His second idea of how we're going to get out of the Jesus issue is, okay. So we're going to let Barabbas go, but hey, why don't we just let them both go? Why don't we just let everybody go? Woohoo! It's Passover. Pass the bread. Pass the wine. Pass the bitter herbs. We're having Passover today. It's a buy one, get one. How about we just put Jesus on the whipping post, beat him up real good, and we'll just kick him out too. How about that? Does that sound like a great idea? And the crowd's like, no, crucify him. I can imagine Pilate standing there on the balcony like, what in the world is going on here? Holy cow. So scourging isn't bad enough? Whipping him on a whipping post isn't bad enough? But they're screaming, crucify him, crucify him. And so now then, Pilate's in a pickle. He's like, I know this man's an innocent man. My wife has told me, don't do it. And so here he is. He's like, okay, well, I can't just whip him. I wanted to let him go. I can't do that. I wanted to whip him and let him go. I can't do that. And so now then Pilate is in the worst possible strait, and he washes his hands and he tries to deny all responsibility. You know what? This isn't my fault. I didn't do it. I didn't arrest Jesus. I didn't accuse Jesus. I'm here, and you know what? I wash my hands of it. This isn't me. I'm done today. I'm out. I'm punched out, and I'm gone. You guys do what you do. And he just throws Jesus kind of he has him whipped, and then he has him turned over to be crucified. But honestly, as I look at the story of Pilate, this guy that's in such a pickle, worst of all, Pilate never really asks Jesus what to do. He has the rabbi who has dumbfounded all kinds of questions. Is it lawful to get divorced? Is it lawful to pay taxes? Jesus has answered all of these various gotcha questions. He's been in so many straits before. Pilate never goes to him and asks what to do. If Pilate does say, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus says, you say it. Pilate does go to him and say, don't you have anything to answer all these people? And Jesus doesn't say anything. So Pilate does interact with Jesus. He does send him over to Herod to try to get an extension to the trial. But ultimately, Pilate never has the one-on-one with Jesus. What do I need to do? And if he had that one-on-one with Jesus, Jesus would have said the same thing to Pilate that he said to Peter, that he said to the devil, that he said to everybody and his brother. I came to the world for this. This is my mission. This is why I'm here. This is why I was born. I'm here to pay for the sins of mankind. Pilate, I love you. It's okay. I'm ready to be crucified. So here we are today, and we have this Jesus. What are we going to do with this Jesus? Are we going to try to bargain? A lot of people try to bargain with God. Hey, I'll do this, you do that. I'll come to church, I'll pay tithes, you do this, and I'll do that. I want you to heal this person over here. I want you to bless me with this, and then I'll do this, and I'll do that. And it kind of becomes this bargain, rigged election with God. Is this how we're going to deal with Jesus? Are we going to find the worst parts in life and try to make some kind of bargain with Jesus? That's what Pilate's trying to do. He's trying to be the controller of it, where we're kind of trying to control it all. Or are we going to minimize the Jesus? Hey, Jesus, you know what? I'm not really up for the crucifixion thing, but, maybe we could do this other thing over here. Can I dedicate a few Saturdays and maybe give some money? Or maybe I got this set of skills over here. I'm really not up for crucifixion. Crucifixion is not for me. I'm glad you did, but I'm going to just kind of do like the half measure. I'll take the scourging. I'll take the scourging and maybe some public ridicule, but the crucifixion is off the table. How about that? Okay, that's not going to work either. And then ultimately, a lot of people wash their hands of it. The homelessness is not my problem. I didn't create homelessness. I've never kicked anybody out of a house. I've never fired anybody off of a job. I didn't create homelessness. Homelessness is not mine. I didn't own it. I want to wash my hands of it. If you want to deal with it, you deal with it. You take your Jesus and you go do whatever it is that you think you need to do. All the other stuff, the drunkenness, the drug addictions, the broken marriages, all of that frickin' frack. I didn't cause it. I didn't initiate it, and I don't want anything to do with it. I want to wash my hands of it. I just want to go to my coffee bar church, have my little tea, sing a little song, have my little Jesus on the side, and otherwise I just want to wash my hands of it and say, not my fault, not my responsibility, I don't have anything to do here. Then there's the right answer. The right answer is to go to Jesus and say, how do I deal with this? How do I do this? What's your plan for this? And Jesus will answer you. Take up your cross, come follow me. Take my burden upon you, for my yoke is easy, my burden is light. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus says, all that follow me, yea, that he lose his life for my sake, yet will he find it. He is the pearl of great price, the treasure lost in a field. And if we will go through the crucifixion with him, if we will deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him, then he is righteous and just, that he will give us life everlasting, that he will give us a life in this life and in the life to come that is so much more, so much better than anything we ever could have had on our own. So the question you're left with today is, what will you do with Jesus?